me to travel with him on his journey of soul that allowed him to get out from under that rock of wanting revenge and wanting to see people die for killing their son. And nobody who ever makes this journey ever says it's easy. And the way Lloyd LeBlanc put it was, he said, everybody was saying that to me about being for the death penalty. He said, I went there. I did. They're right. I wish I could pull the switch myself. I'd like to see him die in front of my eyes. I wish we could have gotten both of them, but we get one of them, I want to see him die. And then he said, you know, I began to notice about myself. I didn't like the way it made me feel when I went there, because I've always been a kind person. I love to help people. I'm good with my hands. I can fix anything. You come to my house, you're going to see lawnmowers and cars. Because, oh, Lord will help you. Lord will help you, because that's who I am. And I was going to that place then where I don't care. I want to see them suffer. I don't care about what their mama's going to go through. Then he said, I just finally said to myself, they killed our son, but I'm not going to let them kill me. I'm going to do what Jesus said. And he set his face then to go down the road. Forgiveness. He said, everybody thinks forgiveness is weak. Like you condoning what somebody does. He said, condone. Every time David has a birthday, we lose him all over again. We'll be coming along and you're settling down and all, then all of a sudden if you have something on the evening news about a teenage couple out in a country place and something bad happens to them, we go through it all over again. But he found his way. He was the one who wrote to the archbishop, the Catholic archbishop in the Lafayette diocese where the murders had happened, saying, we never see the church on the side of victims' families. And that year, the bishop began to have a mass. And the bishop said it, to gather in victims of violence with the arms of the faith community around them. And out of that, support groups came, which continues to this day. And Lloyd LeBlanc was the one who helped me then make my way to the victim's family. Not because I'd done it all right. I'd done it all wrong. But he showed me. And then I began to go to these support groups. Parents of murdered children. I heard people's stories. Most people who kill each other know each other. You know that, don't you? That most of the killings are people who know each other. It's not that much stranger on stranger killing of people. And in the NRA's thing of getting people to get guns, it's for self-defense. You're going to defend your family. If you would see the percentage of people who have actually defended their loved ones with a gun over against the accidental killings, and then people in a rage are angry over something, that have a gun in their hands and kill each other. And that's another whole thing, but we got to go down that road eventually in this country about that. But Lloyd LeBlanc was the first to teach me. And then as I went to these support groups, person after person, one thing I noticed is people could talk about the crime and what had happened in this very dispassionate voice. And my daughter was here, and I realized part of their healing was being able to talk about what actually happened. And that's also when I found out that that's why so many people back away. One woman in the support group said, I was talking to my best friend, been 1 year since our daughter, Susie, had been killed, and my best friend says to me, as I go to talk about Susie, oh, Shirley, you really ought to be past that by now. Don't you think you should see a therapist or something? She didn't want to hear me talk about it. And she's my best friend. And people are shying away from the victim's family. You look and see what the state of Florida does for victims' families. If you do even the tiniest comparison between what is put in from the resources of this state to help victims' families, 70% of people who lose a child get divorced. Whatever fault lines are in the marriage, the stress of it all breaks it apart. And what happens to the siblings when you have a brother or sister killed? One of the siblings in one of the families told me, I was lost in the family after my sister was killed. always remembering her anniversary, always remembering her birthday. My birthday barely came and went, and I was so absorbed now with the whole victims thing and all of that, I got lost. Divorce, people losing their jobs, not being able to focus, some people not even having the money for the funeral expenses. What do we really do to help victims' families? And then to raise that question, to tell a family, sometimes you see victims' families coming out after a capital trial and they've gotten the death penalty and you see them with the victory thing, we won. And they're talking in the media, yeah, we got justice today. And then you know they're going to start waiting. 10 years, 15. Anytime there's a change in the status of the case, because it's public records, the media's going to be at their door. How do you feel? He got another stay of execution. Are they having another hearing in the court? And they can't put it down. And the wound is public, and they're waiting for this moment. Waiting for this moment. When New Jersey did away with the death penalty, 62 murder victims' families testified before that legislature saying, don't kill for us. Don't think that by giving the death penalty that you're going to help us. Because they knew enough about the process and the waiting that it was not going to do anything for them. And even if they were summoned in, and finally they'd get to watch the person die, they had worked it through in themselves to know that watching another person be killed is not going to heal them. They came from different points of view, but basically it was, one of them said, look, my daughter was killed, and even if I would watch the man be executed and killed, and when I come home after the execution, the chair is still going to be empty where she was sitting. And what's it going to do to us while we're doing all this waiting for this moment of justice? Does the death penalty really heal victims' families? And if you've ever been heard at a capital trial, the language used to you, the jury, they're going to have to make a unanimous decision for death now. You know you have a choice, and that person truly is going to serve life without parole in this state if they're not going to get the death penalty. They're never going to walk out again. And the first rule of a prison is classification of prisoners. They know that people who are truly sociopaths, who kill, like to kill, feel nothing killing, are going to be in the most locked down part of the prison to protect the guards and other prisoners from people like them. But then to go there and to just say, okay, we're going to watch. I've been in the killing chamber at Texas that has killed over 400 people. And there's a well, and the gurney's right in the middle. And over across on that side is where the 12 witnesses for the state are going to get to watch the killing. They're going to be the official witnesses for the state. They're going to sign the forms afterwards. On the other side is where the victim's family sends representatives, just a couple of representatives. You can't have a whole family in there. And they are going to watch as the killing happens. And then that third witnessing chamber, and it has glass in front of it, and you can see the face of the person on the gurney, is where mothers have stood with their hands against that glass as the state of Texas killed their child. Now, their child did a terrible crime. They killed a human being. And now the state's killing them. And the mother's standing there now. And now she's going to have a child dead too. And there's going to be another funeral. There's going to be another burial. There's going to be another weeping family. We've got to ask ourselves, what are we doing? What's the rhetoric that holds it up, that makes us say, yeah, we got to do it? And I get brought right into it, right up into the fire. And so then I'm with the murder victims' families, learning, starting a group in New Orleans. I didn't change the whole world. I started one blooming group called Survive to help murder victims' families because I know everybody's leaving them alone. And then I'm with the man who's executed. I'm with this man, Patrick Saunier, after the journey over 2 years. And as it's getting close to the time, and he was trying to build up his strength and the dignity to walk to his death, truly remorseful for their death. How do I know he was remorseful? Because I'd been with him for 2 years. I'd been part of the conversation. I've been part of his sharing with me that when they would dim the lights on the tier on death row at midnight, he'd kneel down by his bunk with his Bible. I have his Bible. I have the Psalms he underlined, like Psalm 31 that I'd never noticed before. Oh God, they plot to take my life, but you, oh God, are my rock, on you I stand. And Psalm 51, oh God, have mercy on me, wash away my sin. True sorrow, what could you do when you've done something that's irrevocable? You can't get it back. Where does the soul go with that? If not to God, and to just say, please forgive me. I rely on your mercy and your compassion, because if I rely on your justice, then I'll be condemned forever. And then as it's getting closer to death, the protocol of death you will not believe. When we did the film of Dead Man Walking, when Susan Sarandon, we were doing all those scenes of waiting for the execution to come, bringing 3 days ahead of time, then he tells me they weighed and measured me. I said, why? He said, well, they don't tell us nothing. So what the guys on the row are saying, they must be measuring us for our coffin. And later the warden will tell me, oh no, it's not that. It's that the guards are going to do the execution after we've got to kind of do a dry run, because some of these guys are pretty big. And they got to be prepared when he goes peacefully. And then you just practice. Left leg, right arm, trump. Get in there, do it. Get in there again and do it. Do it. Do it quickly. Just do your part of your job. And then they also got to be prepared if he fights in every way. Every step of the way. And he's looking in their eyes and they say, don't kill me. Don't kill me. This guy, Lewis Williams, I talk about him in the second book, The Death Venison. He was all calm the day before. This was in Ohio. He had met with his lawyers. He was reading his Bible. All calm till the execution squad came to get him in his cell. And his hands gripped the bars like they were welded to him. And he was screaming, God, you are my witness. I'm innocent. Don't let him kill me. Don't let him kill me. And he's looking in the face of the guard and just saying, don't kill me. The one thing the guards have been told, you're not killing anybody tonight. You're carrying out the law. Somebody's got to do it. We are just carrying out. Supreme Court, all legal acts. You are just carrying it out. And they had to drag Lewis Williams, struggling, kicking all the way down the hall, throw him on the gurney, throw their bodies over his to hold him on there. And the journalist that recorded this story did a telling detail in the story. That as they're strapping him down on there, one of the guards pats his shoulder comfortingly. Pats him like it's going to be okay. The untold story is the guards that have done the 72 killings that happened. One of them last night in Florida, in your name, our name's on the gurney. We never lift a finger. We don't even know about the death penalty. We're a democratic society. The law is on the books and it's done in our name. When we awaken to injustice, we can't be neutral. We got to begin, or we're invited to act, because if we don't act, then we remain complicit. That's the way there's any kind of change in society. Same thing happened with slavery. People could walk through the town square and see these families being auctioned off, mothers separated from their children. They could walk, they could do their shopping. This is just what we do. Those slave people, they don't have feelings like we do anyway. They come from Africa. They're different from us. How did slavery change? How did women get the vote? How do we change anything? The people wake up. And the people wake up and we work for change. And what sealed me then was being with this man, knowing the crime, horrified at the crime. In Dead Man Walking, on every book, page of that book, you can feel the tension of horrified at the crime and then being brought into this process of what it means to kill a human being who's been rendered defenseless and take him out and kill him. And how hard that is to do. Stories are coming out now about executioners. Jerry Gibbons in Virginia killed 62 people. He was the executioner. He was behind that one-way glass. Nobody ever knew that he was the one doing the plunger on the hypodermic that put poison in people and killed 62 people. And in giving his public confession, it all came out in Newsweek. He said, I'll be honest with you. Some of those guys, knowing their crime, I had what's called an executioner's high. He got it. We did justice. And began to work on him. And work on him. And one of the things he says that worked on him was he knew what was written on the death certificate. That you got to put cause of death. What do you put? Failure to breathe? Heart attack? The name, the truth is told on the death certificate. And he knew, Jerry Gibbons knew what was written on it. Homicide. Human being killing another human being. And he knew he was the human being who was pushing the knee. And so their stories are beginning to come out to us as a society. And with me, with Patrick, he tried to save me from seeing it at the end. He said, sister, you can't be there at the end. You just pray God holds up my legs. Because it could scar you to see this. And all I knew was, I said, you're not going to die alone. And there's this thing, I'll call it grace. And it's just inside me. It was very, very strong. I said, Patrick, I don't know what it's going to do to me. And that's not the point, what it's going to do to me. You are not going to die without a human face to be there for you, a loving face. I'll be the face of Christ for you. You look at me when they do this. And he did. I carry his face. I came out of that execution chamber, threw up. Bill and a good friend, Ann Barker, waiting for me, put a coat around me. I was so cold we had to stop the car because I had to throw up. I never watched a human being be killed in front of my eyes. I know he did a terrible crime. But when you see the act, and one of the things I realized when I came out, it's there in the dark, the middle of the night, and I remember thinking clearly. In fact, it's the thing that brings me here before you today. The people are never going to get close to this. They're going to read the paper, another execution done. You're never going to see an execution. You're never going to be present. You're never going to be brought close. I had been brought close. I was a witness. I had to tell the story. And so I began to just give talks to whoever would hear, and that's why I wrote the book and the second book. And that's why I crisscross the country and give talks. To bring it before the people and say, think about it. Is this what we got to do? Because when the people reflect on things and go to a deeper level, we're going to choose the path of the other nations, but we can't do it without educating our people. And people are deeply ambivalent about this. That 61% that still say they support the death penalty, that's on the up-down question. When there's a terrible crime, are you for the death penalty? Yeah. When you give people the choice, if you have the death penalty or life without parole, a growing number, a majority of people now are saying, hey, as long as I know he's safe, and that guy isn't going to be out and killing people again, that's enough for me. More and more people are saying that. Because nobody really wants to kill. And the juror really doesn't want to kill either. And it's all in each one's hands. Because if they don't get a unanimous decision, I don't know, do you have judge override here? Can the judge override the jury here? I think you do have some instances where you have a whole jury decide the person shouldn't get death. The judge say, nah, I think they ought to get death. Look how this thing is put together. And jurors then left with, because if they don't vote for death, the person lives. So each one of them, in effect, has that person's life in their hands. Ordinary citizen being asked at shoulder whether or not to make a decision to kill a fellow human being. So I'm going to leave it here, and we can have maybe some conversation together. How are we doing on time?
You're doing fine. Questions from the audience?
Questions? Comments? What do you think? You thought about this much? Yes.
I actually have a question for this gentleman, because
Bill?
on the statistics that you put down, there was 200 and some odd people on death row in Pennsylvania, but you said they haven't executed anybody kind of moratorium there, or?
Well, I think it just shows the state to state. Some states, it takes an act of the governor to actually say, all these people on death row, I'm going to choose this person and they're going to do it. Other states do it automatically. And so California has tons of people on death row. And so it's literally a state by state decision on that. Louisiana, for example, we had initially that the people are convicted, and then they can appeal if they want to. They didn't have to do it, and then then it was up to the governor to say, okay, now it's your turn, and they would put them on. And then as that happened, then the governor said, I don't want to do that. So they changed the law so that there's a certain amount of time just automatically puts you up there. So each state has a different way of making that happen, and that's again part of the place issue of how it's
Also,
Yeah.
Are there any states that have the death penalty but haven't done an execution since '76? In other words, there's states that don't have the death penalty. Right? I just want to know if there's one state that has the penalty but has not exercised it since it became.
Well,
Did New Hampshire ever kill anybody? And New Jersey hadn't in I don't know how many years. Northeast, less than 1% are done. Go ahead.
we do have the opposite, obviously, which is that there are just a handful of states that are just killing people left and right. We're in one. Yeah. We live in one. Texas is one. There's, big overlap in these states with the Confederacy. And, so the race and place
Slavery.
issues, slavery, the kinds of things. And so the further you get away from that, the further it is actually in most cases to the death penalty. Either whether they have it or they're going to use it even to do it.
They did a study about 7 years ago that showed that when there's a significant population of people of color, enough to threaten whites, that's where you have the harshest penal system and where you tend to have the death penalty. And the 10 southern slave states do 80% of the executions and always have. And we don't have a Supreme Court that ever looks at the ground to see how their so-called pure criteria of the worst of the worst is being applied. If they ever took a course in sociology and they ever got on the ground to see how their theory is working, they'll abolish the death penalty at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. But they never look on the ground. They never look in practice how this thing works out. Isn't it odd that 80% of all your executions happened in the 10 southern states that practiced slavery? Less than 1% of the states in the Northeast that had the death penalty executed anybody. One of them in Connecticut that just ended it was Michael Ross, who asked to be executed. He was a serial killer. He talked about this demon inside of him. He tried to commit suicide 3 times on the bridge where he went to Cornell, where he was killing women. He said this demon get him, he'd kill women. So he's asking to be executed. That's the only one they ever executed in Connecticut. And that's one of the things they looked at. We're not really using this thing. New Jersey looked at it. We're not really using this thing. But you see our work is cut out for us in the South because we are really using this thing. But the people, by and large, are disconnected from it. So when we can wake up the people, we're going to change it. That's you. That's me.
It's all of us, yeah, because the Supreme Court says we don't want to get in the way. The jurors made the decision. And the jurors are saying, well, the judge told us if they show us this and that, then we have to make the decision. And then the judge is the prosecutor saying, I'm just doing my job to ask for the death penalty because that's one of the things that I have to ask for. And if you talk to any of these people, except some of these prosecutors, you talk to most people that say, I didn't do it. Not me. It's them. And 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 what that tells us as grown-ups is that's a system. That is a system. It's not one person who's wrong or who's right. It's a system that we have created that creates these victims, the victims of the people who died and the victims of the people who killed them.
It's interesting that you say that the system is the one, because the way I'm seeing it from the story you said about the prosecutor who was dying from cancer, who had covered up the evidence, it seems to me like there's sometimes political factor. Whether
big
if
one.
this would have come out, it would have been a huge scandal. The credibility would have been lost by the prosecuting state attorney's office, and whatnot. As far as the police officers, everybody will be investigated as to the evidence why wasn't it shown? Because everybody was in the know, right? Everybody that investigated the case. So I think it goes like beyond that fear, that willingness to do justice, right, from the prosecutor, because he thought in his head that this man was guilty. There was also this cover-up for political reasons, and I feel like the judges as well play into this, because a lot of these prosecutors and as well as judges, they want to advance in their careers.
I'm glad you see the role politics plays. The easiest political symbol in the world to show you tough on crime is say you for the death penalty. And look at how many, when people run for election, politicians, they gonna say they're for the death penalty, whether or not they are. Because it's just like, oh, well, that's what the people expect. This is how I show I'm tough on crime. And it's the real roots of crime are where? What? Why is it that when we look at the track record, the states that have used the death penalty the most generally have higher violence than the states that never used it at all? What's violence related to? The root causes of violence. And that's much harder to do, because then you got to get into poverty. You got to get into people's lives and when they're thrown out of the mainstream and how then it all comes in. And that's hard to do. It's easy to say, oh, yeah, I got the magic bullet, I'm for the death penalty.
And if you do the little bit of history, so this is not Republican Democrat stuff,
Right.
You remember when Bill Clinton was running for president the first time, people were saying, he's just, he had the draft thing and he had the thing with women and all that stuff. And people say, well, he's wishy-washy in that. And what did he do? While he was running for president, is he allowed the execution of a mentally retarded man to go forward in his state while he was running for president, in order to show, to make the move, and make it clear, just this, I can be as tough as the Republicans.
Right.
And so it's not Democrat, Republican stuff. It is politics. And politics is sometimes another name for justice. The story, too, we talk about this, how does change come about? Women couldn't vote, right? Couldn't vote for forever. Susan B. Anthony, she did an act of civil disobedience during an election. She ran in with a couple other women, and they just went and stuffed their ballot into the box. And so they didn't know what they had done. And when she was prosecuted for that, they said, do you have something that you want to say? And she said, I would like to talk about the justice of excluding women from the democracy that we're in. The judge said, sit down. We're not talking about politics in this courtroom. So it was politics if you want the status quo, and it's justice if you're the person who's actually trying to do something about it. And now it is so clear, right? It's so clear that women should have the right to vote. And it's so clear that segregation and slavery was wrong. And it's so clear that people should be able to get together and have a labor union. It's so clear that children shouldn't have to work in factories. And it's so clear that people with disabilities ought to have the same sort of access that other people have. And it's so clear that domestic violence has to be addressed. But 100 years ago, none of these things were clear. All the churches, all the universities, everybody, we all said, well, that's it. That's the best we can do. There might be something wrong with it, but that's the best we can do. And when I look back, one of the things I do with my students is say, we look back 100 years and we can see what was totally legal, but was totally unjust. But what do we think, what 100 years from now are people going to look back at us today and say, how could those people have put up with this and live with themselves? We're not going to be living with slavery. We're not going to be living with it. But, what about this stuff? This is one of the things I think people are going to say, how could they have just gone about their lives while this is happening? And so that's the challenge, I think, for us to think about our grandchildren and that, there's people who were in Nazi Germany, lawyers who challenged Hitler. Actually, lawyers got Hitler on the stand before he was had all the power. Put him on the stand and challenged some of the things that his party was doing. They lost the case. They got run out of the country. Another lawyer ended up getting executed himself. But think how proud those grandchildren are that that somebody tried. They stood up for this. And think how proud Susan B. Anthony's kids and grandkids and great-grandkids are, you know, that she tried, she did all this stuff. And that the people who fought against slavery in the 1820s and 1830s, they probably didn't even live to see the end of slavery. But they fought, they tried. And so that's the challenge, I think the justice challenge for all of us, is to try and figure out what we think is right and then work with other people to try to do something about it. Supreme Court's not going to answer this. Supreme Court's not going to lead us in terms of justice. The court is going to follow. The laws usually follow where justice comes from. So that's the challenge for us, to educate, activate, organize, be a storyteller. Sister Helen has talked to hundreds of thousands of people, sold hundreds of thousands of these books and just telling the story and bringing those pieces of justice home. And that's the challenge for all of us. And it's exciting that so many of you are here to be a part of that challenge. And
On a Friday afternoon, man, y'all must be special. Yes.
A couple of my students raised a few points. One of them said, why don't we institute a federal system then that trumps the state systems?
Very interesting.
Would probably be, if it were to pass, could be more just. And why do we have in the legal justice system elections that are political?
Yeah. The judges, you mean?
Judges, prosecutors.
Yeah. What if we had the federal system? We do have the federal.
Yeah, unfortunately, the federal system does have the death penalty too. You know, and we're going to probably see that with some of the Guantanamo people. We talk about just a farce. I mean, and a shame, international shame. You know what? We just saying those people are other. Those are different, and so it's the process of othering everybody. So I mean, I think the question of elections of judges is, you know, there's a lot of people that challenge the election of judges. The people on this Supreme Court, they weren't elected. You know, the U.S. Supreme Court, they were appointed, and they were appointed by the party in power. So the thing is, it's got to be us. It has to be us the counterweight. Because if an elected judge or elected prosecutor, if they thought the people who didn't want it, they wouldn't do it. They're not leading, they are following. Most elected officials are doing what they think we want them to do. And so the change has to come from us. There are things that we can do systematically. Make sure that everybody had a lawyer. Make sure that people have a lawyer from the very beginning, that they have investigators, that they have the opportunity to really do these things, that they really document the mental history, the physical history of people who commit crimes the same way we do it. There's a million things that we can do to really narrow it down, to try to make it more fair.
So then shouldn't law schools be responsible in the United States for instigating and beginning this idea like they did with the Innocence program and a few other programs to say, we're the leaders, we're the ones who should take the responsibility and follow through with it?
Absolutely.
That's a real one. You know the best definition of justice? It's just us. And I was 40 years old before I woke up to all this. And I look at the young faces in here. If you become alive for justice and for a cause much bigger than yourself and work for that, and you begin to feel within your heart that passion that it's bigger than just you, then your life is, you're going to, as Khalil Gibran says, you're going to laugh all your laughter and cry all your tears, and you're going to really be alive. And being alive is learn to catch that wave, bigger than us, but we get to be part of something that is good and noble and right, and work for that. Rangers don't last long. They do their little flare, they disappear. And you no room for Lone Rangers. Lone Ranger, the side of the hill, you do it in community. Draws you into community. And that's a gift too, because you're working together. There is a group in Florida, and it's Floridians to End the Death Penalty in Florida. They have been working for over 25 years. And I want to encourage you to look them up and join them and start putting your efforts into that group.
And Amnesty International as well, which is a big part of what they do. They work around the world on injustices and human rights. This is one of the things we work on in the United States.
Yes.
This question is for you, actually. Now that you're working not only with the people on death row, but also with the victims' families,
6 people I have actually accompanied to death. There's only one victim's family that allowed me to be part of that with them. All the rest, they put you on a seesaw, because if you're against the execution, because this is what everybody's telling them, that those who are really your friends are going to be for the execution. And so most often there's not that one-on-one, like Manuel Ortiz on death row now. The victim's family doesn't want to have anything to do with me. But what I always do is I reach out to them. The victims' families I do work with are all those that are not particular related to the people I'm taking on death row.
What do most of those victim families, what would they want if they're not for the death penalty in the end? What do they want to see happen?
Well, they definitely want to see that the person never is on the streets again and can kill other people. Safety is, and a lot of them are just asking for help in their family, like real help for healing, therapy, the real help that you need to be a family. And I remember one time in Oklahoma City, this is just, Timothy McVeigh was executed in a relatively short period of time, 5 years after the Oklahoma City bombing, 168 people killed around. And Catholic Charities had called together rescue workers and victims' families in one afternoon to just talk about what do we do to heal. And I'll never forget this, because I was facilitating it and people getting up, like the rescue workers. One young woman got up. She had to go to a mental asylum for 6 months. She was so, these bodies of these innocent people broken and traumatized by carrying out so horrible. And then victims' family, well, I want to see Timothy McVeigh die, and others getting up and saying, what good is that going to do? And so it was coming to the end, and there was a guy sitting over to the right, kind of like on a bench thing, and he was opposite me. I was up at the podium. We get ready to end it, and he said, can I say something? And I mean, every eye in that room turned to that man that we hadn't even noticed sitting there. He said, look, could we not use that word closure anymore? He said, we lost our daughter in the bombing. And he said, there's not a night as a father I put my head on the pillow, I don't think of her. With God's grace, we're moving on. We're loving our children. But closure, you close a chapter in a book and you close on a house. You never close on a life. And that's such a futile thing to offer people, that it's going to be closure for us. And that was what he did.
One thing, just to supplement your question in terms of, as a human rights advocate, and this is important for any of us that are doing this, is that we can't allow people to, one of the geniuses of Sister Helen is that she broke out of the box of, I'm just on the side of the people who are going to get executed. That she tried to move across the aisle and talk to the people who are the families of the victims. And this is our society, and all these things always push us that we're either or. We're either on the side of the prosecutor or we're side of the defendant. As a human rights activist, though, people have a right to be safe. We all have the right to be safe. Safe in order to protect somebody from being executed. We have to reject these false choices that people give us. They give it to you as a college student. So we're not talking about you have to give up your right to be safe. Well, look, you either can have a career or you can do something good. Or you can either be a mom or you can have a job. Or you can either have a lot of them to reject these false choices. And so human rights says everybody has a right to be safe. So we're not talking about whether we talk reducing the number of people in prison or stopping the death penalty or stopping the police from using certain kinds of weapons or closing Guantanamo or any of those things. We're not talking about giving up safe money or you can be happy. Whatever, it's our job to say we can find a better way to be safe. That our safety and your right to be safe and my right to be safe isn't advanced by this, and there are other things that we can do. So rejecting those false things that we're on a side, but society keeps pushing. Sister Helen will tell you, at every trial, if the defendant is on this side, and this side is the prosecutor, then on this side is always the victim's family, and their friends and that. And on that side are the people that are related to the defendant. And that happens when you go to the Court of Appeals and that, but it also happens when you go to the clemency board. The last thing where people are going, they have the decision of life or death at the very end. They tell you, if you're on the side of the guy who wants life, then you stay on this side. If you're on the victim side, then you're on that side. Well, what about people who are on both sides? There isn't a place for it. The room is split in two. And so part of our challenge to do this kind of work is to say we reject these splits in two. That there are ways that we can honor safety and we can also honor life and that stuff about us. Because I think ultimately, when you come to the death penalty, the way I look at it too, is it's not necessarily about this person who committed murder. Because maybe if there is that, then that person deserves it. But what does the death penalty say about us? What does it say about the United States? What does it say about our state? What does it say about our system? That we are going to accept murdering somebody who murdered somebody who murdered somebody. At some point it has to stop. And the world is going that way, our country is going that way, and if we're going that way, and we understand it, then let's stop now. You don't want to be the last person, don't want to be the last soldier to leave Afghanistan. Don't want to be the last prosecutor that sends somebody to the death chamber. You don't want to be the last guard that drags a person down there when they're executed and the like. So if we know it's coming, and we know that's the way that it's going, and we say people can be safe, if we can say that, when's the last time that somebody really broke out of a secure prison any place in the United States? Prison stuff is big, big business. They make them pretty safe. So safety, we reject those false choices, and then we're going to go for all of the human rights.
That's actually the campaign in California. They know they spent, y'all are going to be blown out of the water by them. I don't know if Bill said that. They spent $4 billion for 13 executions. It's costing them to keep the death penalty in place $186 million a year. It's over the top. And the people are going, man, we're under crunch, budget crunch. And Martin Luther King used to say, the most moral document you ever look at is a budget. Are you using the resources of the state for life, help at-risk kids, to get health care for people, get affordable housing for people? Or using it on the machinery of death? And, Florida has a big death row. You've already gone down there. It's one of the big executing states. That things can change. And it's conscious, conscientious citizens waking up and beginning to act that changes things. And be in it for the long haul. Well, I'll be in it for a little while, but I don't like that. I'm going to change my major, go take some guitar lessons or something. To be in it. Catch the fire of it. I'll promise you, it's going to be the most exciting ride of your life. To get part of a wave, to catch a wave that is really big and noble. And it's going to take everything, and you get tired, but it's a good time. And you meet some of the best human beings in the world. Human rights activists are among the best I've met anywhere in the world, in the United States. Young people that get it and begin to work for justice. Yes?
Question for you. Has any of the people that you have worked with that are now facing death row or that have faced death row, have they ever asked you if they rather, that they know that they committed those crimes, that they rather be dead than spend the rest of their lives in prison?
Never. That is always a question of people looking at it from the outside. Well, look, I know if I was faced with the death penalty, rather than be in prison the rest of my life, I'd rather die. Well, you're looking at it from your armchair, having this interesting little conversation. Now, there are consensual executions. There are people, it's never been anybody I've been. And hey, you know what? I don't know what kind of stress I could take day in and day out, and there are people who just give up their appeals and just say, take me, I want it to be over. And there are people who do that. But none of them I've ever been with. People want to live. And even when they know they've done something terrible, you want to help people take responsibility for what you've done. But then to live your and they all the people I've been in life, and to be responsible for wanted to.
But then how do you know that you're not doing that person a favor by killing them? What comes after death?
Who are we to decide that?
I don't know. We don't know. We never know that.
We'll never know it, but we do at least know our limits to be able to get on the inside of eternity, bud. That's it. God's finished with you. We're going to decide that for you. We do know our limits, that we don't know that. At least as a person, and decide for them. It's time for you to go into it and say that. Who am I to determine this?
Well, not to go against that.
No, go ahead.
That thing, but like I hope I'll never be in that situation.
Which one?
Like on death row. Or,
Well, you just stick with your studies now.
but I mean, life turns in very awkward ways, and
Yeah.
you still have to think about it. But in example, I lost a friend.
Was murder?
Suicide. After you left.
That's the worst in a way.
He was a Marine. He killed me. He shot a cop. Then he took his life. I guess he did it because he didn't want to spend his life in prison. That's my answer.
Did you say he was a Marine? Had he seen combat? Was he in
Yes.
Iraq?
So I guess he did it because he didn't want to end up in prison. Yeah.
I understand now where your questions come. Sorry about you.
It almost seems like the death penalty we're committing a crime to penalize a crime. We're killing
To show killing is wrong.
to show killing is wrong. I mean, the logic there is not valid.
Bill, let's talk to him about Patrick's question, his son Patrick. Well, you're the one. All right. This is in Devon Walking. Patrick was, about 7. He was going through his little monster phase. There's a monster under my bed. I can't go to sleep at night because the monster's going to get me. So Bill and Debbie who's sitting back there in the white, second last, they take turns sitting with Patrick when it's time for him to go to sleep so they can keep the monster away. And so Bill is reading the case of Wayne Feldy, a Vietnam vet, the first one whose trial PTSD was used during his trial. And he got into a fight with a guy at a bar. This is after Vietnam. Gets into a fight with a guy at a bar, kills him, and he's on death row in Louisiana. Bill has the case in the last days trying to save Wayne Feldy's life. So he's sitting by Patrick's door. So, Dad, what you read? Well, it's Wayne Feldy's case. He said, well, what did he do? And Bill says, well, he did a real bad thing. He killed a person. He got in a fight in a bar. He killed a person. And so Patrick says, well, what are they going to do to him? He said, well, the state of Louisiana wants to execute him. And so and we have the case, and then we're trying to keep him from doing it. And Patrick said, well, Dad, if they kill him, then who's going to kill them for killing him? It's just like you're saying. The kid got it. Kids can get it. Or another kid one time was given to a talk, 7th and 8th graders in a gymnasium. You want to talk about a room full of Alka-Seltzer. Anyway, comes time for the questions. Here's this kid. Says stuff. They're killing the guy with the lethal injection thing, right? They're going to put the poison in? I said, right. He said, how come they put that alcohol on his arm before they put the needle in? I said, very good question. Because they want to have a very clean antiseptic death. Yes.
You mentioned the motivation, the responsibilities to give the death penalty. Is it the actual executions or the killing of the inmates? And if the killing of the inmates wouldn't life in prison cause mistakes in them?
Good question. Sure seems like our good taxpayers' dollars, right? I'm not going to pay my taxpayers' dollars, give that guy 3 hots in the cot the rest of his life. What's a few little chemicals cost? Let's just get rid of them. And it sounds counterintuitive. Everything about the death penalty is more expensive, and prosecutors themselves will tell you it's a Cadillac of the criminal justice system. You have not just one trial, but two, and one is just for sentencing. Then you got to build a special part of the prison. You got to have special personnel, and you have a complicated, convoluted appeal system where it goes on forever. And you're paying all this time. That's what's happened with California. They have 720 people on death row, but it takes on average 20 years for an execution. So they're tabulating it up and just seeing, we could put this money into community policing. We could be putting it into preventing violence, solving cold cases. They're just thinking of all the ways that you can use that money. But case at state after state after state, it always turns out it costs more. In Florida, it costs more too. The more you do, the more you look into it, you're going to see, what is it, about $2.3 million that you're paying for each execution that you get. Over against life imprisonment, generally $500,000, $600,000. And then people are allowed to work, at least to help pay for their board keep. On death row, you just sit in the cell, and you have these guards appointed to you. When you go to the death house, they have a guard watching you 24 hours a day to make sure you don't try to commit suicide and deprive the state of taking your life.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you for your attention, and join me in thanking our speakers.
Thank you.